Metal shavings scattered across the worn wooden workbench as Jack Sullivan's calloused hands guided the plane along the edge of an ornate mahogany drawer. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through dusty windows of his small restoration workshop on the outskirts of Boston, catching motes of sawdust that danced in the air. His phone vibrated against the bench, the screen illuminating with Oak Ridge Elementary. Jack set down his tools with practiced precision, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Principal Winters. I'm afraid we have another situation with Ethan." Jack's jaw tightened as he glanced at the clock. 3:15, still 2 hours before he was supposed to pick up Ethan from the after-school program. What happened this time? He became quite upset during art class. He's claiming the teacher's bracelet was making a high-pitched sound that no one else could hear. When she wouldn't remove it, he had what we call an episode. An episode. Their sanitized term for what happened when the world became too much for his son. Jack closed his eyes, picturing 10-year-old Ethan curled in a corner, hands pressed against his ears, rocking back and forth. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Before he could slide the phone back into his pocket, it rang again. Unknown number. Jack almost ignored it, but something, perhaps the military instinct that never quite left him, made him answer. Sullivan Restorations. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Meredith Klein from the Sterling Innovation Center. We need someone to repair and reinforce a 19th century display cabinet for our Tech Vision Gala this Friday. Our usual contractor just backed out, and your name was recommended by the Boston Museum of Fine Arts." Jack glanced at the half-finished bureau he'd been restoring for weeks. "I'm in the middle of another project and I have family. We're prepared to offer $15,000 for 3 days' work. The piece must be ready by Friday evening." Jack's breath caught. 15,000 would cover 6 months of Ethan's specialized therapy sessions, the ones their insurance kept denying. It would mean financial breathing room they hadn't had since Sarah died. "I need to check my schedule. Can I call you back in an hour?" He hung up, grabbed his jacket, and headed for his truck. The ancient Ford groaned to life, the engine protesting as he pulled onto the road toward Oak Ridge Elementary. 20 minutes later, Jack strode through the school's front entrance, nodding to the secretary who knew him by name. Too many episodes had made him a regular visitor. Principal Winters stood outside her office, her expression a practiced blend of concern and exasperation. Through the glass door, Jack could see Ethan sitting alone, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the pattern in the carpet. "Sullivan, we value diversity at Oak Ridge, but Ethan's sensory issues are becoming more disruptive. Have you considered the specialized program at Westridge?" The specialized program. A polite way of saying they wanted his son segregated from normal children. "Ethan stays at Oak Ridge. It's his neighborhood school, and it's where his mother taught." Winters sighed. "I understand your attachment, but we're not equipped for children with Ethan's unique challenges. Mrs. Peterson said he threw paintbrushes across the room today." Jack's patience thinned. After she refused to remove jewelry that was causing him physical pain. "My son doesn't make things up, Principal Winters. If he said he heard something, he heard it." He pushed past her and entered the office, kneeling beside Ethan. The boy's blue eyes, so like Sarah's, remained fixed on the carpet pattern. Jack knew better than to touch him right away. "Hey, buddy, rough day." Ethan's voice came quietly. Her bracelet was screaming "Dad," like metal fingers on a chalkboard, but inside of my brain. I asked her 3 times to take it off. "I believe you." Those 3 words, the ones Jack knew mattered most to his son. In a world that constantly questioned Ethan's reality, Jack remained his unwavering anchor. "Ready to head home?" Ethan nodded, still not making eye contact. He stood keeping precise distance between himself and Jack as they walked out past Principal Winters and her disapproving gaze. In the truck, Ethan fastened his seatbelt with deliberate movements. "Am I in trouble?" "No, but we need to work on how you respond when things get overwhelming. Throwing things isn't the answer, even when adults don't listen." Ethan traced the worn stitching on his seatbelt. "I tried counting backward from 20 like Dr. Lehman taught me, but the sound kept getting louder. It felt like my brain was going to crack open." Jack navigated through afternoon traffic, stealing glances at his son. Ethan had been diagnosed with sensory processing disorder at age 5, after months of Sarah insisting to doctors that something was wrong. Their son experienced the world differently. Sounds too loud, lights too bright, textures that could trigger meltdowns. But alongside these challenges came remarkable gifts: pattern recognition that bordered on savant-like extraordinary memory, and an empathy that sometimes seems supernatural. I got a call today about a job, a big one at the Sterling Innovation Center. Ethan perked up slightly. Technology was one of his safe topics. The place where they are showing the quantum processor. I read about it online. It can perform calculations that would take regular computers a million years. That's the one. Jack paused at a red light. It would mean working late for a few days, and you'd have to come with me to the gala on Friday evening. Ethan stiffened. A gala with people in fancy clothes and loud music and perfume everywhere. Yes, but I'd make sure you had everything you need: your noise-canceling headphones, your pressure vest. We'd have a quiet space to retreat to. Jack hesitated. The money would cover your therapy with Dr. Lehman for 6 months, Eth. Silence filled the truck as Ethan processed this information. Jack knew better than to rush him. His son's mind worked like an intricate clock. All the gears needed to align before he could respond. Finally, Ethan spoke. Sometimes you have to face what scares you to find what you need. Jack nearly missed the turn into their driveway. It was exactly what Sarah used to say when facing difficult situations. Her personal mantra through cancer treatments and beyond. Ethan had been 7 when she died, but somehow he'd absorbed her wisdom like a sponge. Where did you hear that? Mom said it before she went to the hospital the last time. Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt as Jack parked. I'll go with you to the gala, but I need to prepare properly. Their house was modest, a small Cape Cod with weathered blue shutters on a quiet street. Inside, everything had its place. Jack had learned early in Ethan's life that predictability and order weren't just preferences for his son, they were necessities. The living room flowed into an open kitchen where the afternoon sun warmed the worn hardwood floors. Photos of Sarah lined the mantel, her laugh forever preserved in candid shots at beaches parks their wedding. Ethan headed straight for his command center, a desk in the corner of the living room with a laptop surrounded by neatly arranged notebooks and colored pencils. Jack watched as his son immediately began researching the Sterling Innovation Center, his small fingers flying over the keyboard. I'll make dinner, chicken and rice, okay? Ethan nodded without looking up, already deep in his preparation routine. Jack moved to the kitchen, beginning the familiar choreography of their evening. As he chopped vegetables, his mind returned to Principal Winters' suggestion of the specialized program. It wasn't the first time the school had hinted they couldn't handle Ethan. Each incident pushed them closer to forcing the issue. The problem was Jack understood their perspective. Ethan's reactions could be intense, even frightening to those who didn't understand. But removing him from mainstream education felt like admitting defeat, like betraying Sarah's belief that their son could thrive anywhere with the right support. Dad, the Sterling Center has 53% more ambient noise than my school gymnasium. I'll need my best headphones. You got it, buddy. Jack's phone buzzed again. Meredith Klein following up. He answered, confirming he'd take the job, then texted Mike Peterson, his former teammate from the SEALs, who occasionally watched Ethan in emergencies. Mike was one of the few people Ethan trusted, partly because he followed Jack's protocols to the letter. Ethan, Mike's going to stay with you tomorrow while I assess the job at Sterling. That work for you? Only if he doesn't bring those chips again. They smell like old socks. Jack smiled. Ethan's sense of smell was as heightened as his hearing. I'll tell him. Plain pretzels only. That night, after Ethan's precise bedtime routine, teeth brushed for exactly 2 minutes, 3 sips of water, 2 pages of reading together, Jack sat on the edge of his son's bed. Ethan lay perfectly centered on the mattress, his blue rocket ship comforter pulled to exactly mid-chest. Dad, do you think Mom would be proud of me even with my episodes? The question blindsided Jack, bringing a sudden tightness to his throat. Your mom was proud of you from the moment you were born, Eth. She used to say your brain was like a Ferrari, high-performance equipment that just needed the right driver. But I got in trouble again today. You're learning to drive that Ferrari. Sometimes there are speed bumps. Jack gently adjusted the comforter. Your mom knew you'd face challenges, but she never doubted you'd overcome them. Neither do I. Ethan nodded, his eyes drifting to the photograph on his nightstand. Sarah holding him as a toddler, both laughing at something outside the frame. I miss her voice. Sometimes I can't remember exactly how it sounded. I know, buddy. Jack's heart ached with familiar weight. Sleep tight. Big day tomorrow. The next morning unfolded with their usual precision. Breakfast toast with the crusts removed, scrambled eggs with exactly 3 turns of the pepper grinder, medications. 1 blue pill for anxiety, 1 white for focus and clothing, soft cotton shirt without tags, elastic waistband pants, Velcro shoes. Jack marveled at how routine became ritual for Ethan, each step necessary for navigating a world that constantly overwhelmed him. Mike arrived at 8 sharp, his muscular frame filling the doorway. Like Jack, he'd left the military after multiple tours, but while Jack had sought peace and craftsmanship, Mike had become a private security consultant. Uncle Mike, Ethan didn't hug him. Physical contact remained challenging, but his whole body vibrated with excitement. Hey, little man, I brought the boring pretzels your dad demanded. Mike winked at Jack. And I thought maybe we could work on that model rocket today. Ethan nodded enthusiastically, and Jack felt a wave of gratitude for his friend's understanding. Mike had taken the time to learn Ethan's needs, never dismissing them as quirks or inconveniences. I'll be back by 3, Jack said, gathering his tools. Call if anything comes up. Mike nodded. We'll be fine. Go make some money. The Sterling Innovation Center rose from the Boston skyline like a gleaming glass monolith. Jack felt immediately out of place as he entered the lobby, in his worn jeans and work boots, carrying his toolbox past executives in tailored suits and researchers in pristine lab coats. Meredith Klein met him at the security desk, a poised woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that assessed him quickly. Mr. Sullivan, thank you for coming on such short notice. Her handshake was firm. The display case is this way. It's been in the Sterling family for generations, but it needs significant reinforcement to safely house the quantum processor prototype. She led him to a roped-off area where an ornate mahogany cabinet stood, its Victorian craftsmanship immediately apparent to Jack's trained eye. He circled it slowly, noting the hairline fractures in the joinery, the weakened hinges that had oxidized over decades. Beautiful piece. Louis XV influence, but American-made, circa 1890. Jack ran his fingers along a carved edge. I can stabilize it without compromising the aesthetics. It'll hold your processor securely. Meredith raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by his knowledge. You know your antiques, Mr. Sullivan. Jack, and yes, it's my job to know. He opened his toolbox, extracting measuring tools. I'll need to remove it to my workshop today, return it Thursday for installation, then be here Friday evening to make any final adjustments before your gala. That won't work, a new voice entered the conversation. Jack turned to see a woman in a tailored navy suit approach, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She moved with the confident precision of someone accustomed to command. The cabinet can't leave the building. Security protocols. Jack straightened, meeting her gaze directly. Then I'll need a workspace here. Victoria Reed, she extended her hand, CEO of Reed Secure. We're handling cybersecurity for the processor unveiling. Her grip matched her demeanor. Strong, confident, no nonsense. Jack noted the intelligence in her eyes, but also something else. A guardedness that felt familiar. Jack Sullivan, we can make it work on site, but I'll need unrestricted access in a proper workspace. Victoria studied him for a moment, then nodded. Meredith will arrange it. The security team will need to vet you, of course. Naturally, I was a SEAL for 12 years. You'll find my credentials in order. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Recognition, perhaps, or reassessment. Military. That explains the posture. Special forces. Among other things. Well, Mr. Sullivan, we appreciate your flexibility. This unveiling represents years of work. She turned to leave, then paused. Will you be working alone? My son will assist me on Friday. He's 10. Victoria's eyebrow arched slightly. The gala is hardly appropriate for children. My son goes where I go. Jack's tone made it clear the matter wasn't negotiable. He'll be professional and stay out of everyone's way. She seemed about to object, then nodded curtly. Your call. Meredith will handle the details. As Victoria walked away, Meredith leaned closer. Don't mind her intensity. The quantum processor is revolutionary technology, and there have been attempts to access it by competitors. Security is understandably tight. I'm just here to fix the cabinet. The politics of cutting-edge tech isn't my concern. Yet as Jack began his initial assessment of the antique, his mind kept returning to Victoria Reed. There had been something in her eyes. A sharpness, yes, but also isolation. He recognized it because he'd seen it in the mirror every day since Sarah died. The look of someone standing alone against the world. By the time Jack returned home, Ethan and Mike had completed the model rocket and were testing its launch mechanism in the backyard. Jack watched from the kitchen window as his son's face lit with pure joy when the small rocket shot into the air trailing smoke. These moments, when Ethan could fully engage with the world without pain, were precious. "Successful mission?" Jack asked as they came inside. "3 launches, each one higher than the last," Mike reported. "The kid's a natural engineer." Ethan beamed, though his eyes remained fixed on the rocket in his hands. "I calculated the optimal fuel-to-weight ratio. Uncle Mike just helped with the dangerous parts." After Mike left, promising to return Friday to help get Ethan ready for the gala, Jack explained what he'd learned about the Sterling Center and the job. "I'll need to work there for the next 3 days. You'll come with me after school tomorrow and Thursday, then we'll both attend the gala Friday evening." Ethan nodded, already adding this information to his mental calendar. "Will I need to wear a tie?" "Yes, but I'll make sure it's the soft one without starch." Jack paused. "There's something else. I met someone today who reminded me a little of you." "How?" Ethan's attention sharpened. "She notices things others miss, sees patterns, stays alert to potential threats. Is she like me? Does she hear things others don't?" Jack smiled. "Not exactly, but she's very smart and very focused. Her name is Victoria Reed, and she runs a security company." "Reed Secure," Ethan said immediately. "They developed the quantum encryption protocol that's being showcased alongside the processor. I read about it during my research." Jack shook his head in amazement. His son's ability to absorb and recall information never ceased to impress him. "That's right. She might seem a little intense when you meet her." "Most adults seem intense to me, Dad." Ethan turned the rocket over in his hands. "Except you and Uncle Mike." The next 2 days fell into a new rhythm. Jack worked at the Sterling Center during school hours, then picked up Ethan, who sat quietly in Jack's makeshift workshop reading or drawing, while his father carefully restored the antique cabinet. The center staff grew accustomed to the quiet boy, who always wore headphones and rarely made eye contact. Victoria Reed appeared occasionally, checking progress without engaging directly. Jack noticed how she watched Ethan from a distance, her expression unreadable. On Thursday afternoon, as Jack was reinforcing the cabinet's base, Victoria approached while Ethan was absorbed in a book about quantum computing. "Your son is remarkably well behaved," she said, her voice low enough not to disturb him. "He's remarkably everything." Jack continued working, his hands never pausing. "But people tend to notice his challenges before his strengths." "What are his strengths?" The directness of her question made Jack look up. "Pattern recognition, memory. Empathy, though, most people miss that one. He feels everything more intensely, the bad and the good." Victoria's gaze shifted to Ethan. "Sensory processing issues, along with anxiety and some obsessive tendencies. The specialists have an alphabet soup of acronyms for it, but labels don't capture who he is." "No, they rarely do." Something in her tone suggested personal understanding. "The cabinet looks excellent. You're skilled at what you do, Mr. Sullivan." "Jack, and thank you." Restoration requires patience and respect for the original craftsmanship. You can't rush it or force materials to behave contrary to their nature. Victoria seemed about to say something more when her phone buzzed. Her expression immediately transformed as she answered all business once again. "Reed here, yes, I'll be right there." After she left, Ethan looked up from his book. "She smells like lavender and electronics." Jack chuckled. "That's oddly specific." "It's an unusual combination. Most people smell like either natural things or artificial things, not both at once." Ethan turned a page. "She's sad underneath." "What makes you say that?" "Her voice has that extra vibration. Like yours does sometimes when you talk about Mom." Jack paused in his work, studying his son. Ethan's perceptions often crossed into territory that seemed impossible, yet were invariably accurate in ways Jack couldn't explain. "Everyone carries something, buddy. even the strongest people. Friday morning arrived with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The cabinet was fully restored. Joints, reinforced hinges replaced with period-appropriate alternatives. Wood polished to a warm glow that highlighted its original beauty. Jack had outdone himself knowing that tonight would bring the final payment that would secure Ethan's therapy. Mike arrived early to help prepare Ethan for the evening. They'd developed a careful protocol for events. Headphones, charged pressure vest, packed emergency exit routes, memorized safe words established. Jack was grateful beyond words for his friend's steady presence. "Looking sharp, gentlemen," Mike said as Jack and Ethan emerged in their suits. Jack had spent 2 hours the night before preparing Ethan's clothing, removing tags, pre-washing the shirt in fragrance-free detergent, ensuring the tie was made of the softest silk. Ethan stood rigidly, clearly uncomfortable, but determined. "The jacket feels like armor, heavy but secure." "That's the idea, buddy. And remember, we have our fallback plan if things get too intense." Mike handed Ethan a small, polished stone, the calm rock they'd found together on a beach years ago. "Keep this in your pocket. When things get overwhelming, hold it tight and remember you can feel it even when you can't control anything else." Ethan nodded solemnly, slipping the stone into his pocket. "Thank you, Uncle Mike." The Sterling Center had transformed for the gala. The sterile modern space now gleamed with crystal chandeliers and elaborate floral arrangements. Staff in black tie directed guests toward the main exhibition hall, where Jack's restored cabinet stood center stage spotlights, highlighting its craftsmanship. Inside, protected by bulletproof glass, sat a device smaller than a shoebox, the quantum processor that had brought tech luminaries from around the world. Jack guided Ethan through the growing crowd, noting how his son's shoulders gradually tightened, his movements becoming more controlled as he fought against sensory overload. They found their assigned position near the cabinet. Jack was to remain on hand in case any last-minute adjustments were needed before the unveiling. "You're doing great," Jack murmured, as Ethan pressed closer to his side. "Remember, we can step out anytime. Just say the word." Ethan nodded his eyes, darting across the room, cataloging every detail. So many patterns here. The way people stand in groups, the servers' movements, the security personnel at each exit. Jack smiled, recognizing his son's coping mechanism. Finding order in chaos helped calm his overloaded senses. "Good observations. Speaking of security, there's Ms. Reed." Victoria Reed moved through the crowd with effortless authority, elegant in a simple black dress that somehow made her stand out more than the elaborately gowned women around her. She was speaking with a young woman, her assistant Jack presumed, while surveying the room with subtle vigilance. "Her assistant doesn't match her patterns," Ethan said suddenly, his voice low. "What do you mean, buddy?" "Everyone else moves in sync with their group. See how those scientists all gesture the same way, and the business people stand the same distance apart." Ethan pointed discreetly. "But Ms. Reed's assistant doesn't mirror her. She's watching different things, and her fingers keep tapping the briefcase. A specific pattern. 3 short, 1 long, 2 short." Jack followed Ethan's gaze. The assistant, a poised woman with auburn hair, stood slightly behind Victoria holding a leather briefcase. Nothing seemed immediately amiss, yet Jack had learned to trust Ethan's observations. His son didn't just see details. He saw inconsistencies that others missed. "Maybe she's nervous. Big event, important people." "No," Ethan insisted, his voice gaining urgency. "She tapped that exact sequence 4 times now. It's deliberate. And look at her eyes. They're tracking security positions, not guests." Jack's military instincts stirred. He'd been trained to notice behavioral anomalies, and now that Ethan had pointed it out, he could see the subtle wrongness in the assistant's demeanor. She wasn't behaving like someone supporting her boss at an important event. She was scanning, assessing, preparing. The crowd's murmuring quieted as the Sterling Center's director took the stage, beginning his introduction. Victoria moved forward, her assistant following with the briefcase. They would formally unveil the processor together. "Dad," Ethan tugged at Jack's sleeve, genuine fear in his voice. "Something's wrong." She just pressed a sequence on the briefcase clasp. 3 short, 1 long, 2 short. The same pattern her fingers were tapping. "I think it's a trigger." Jack didn't hesitate. Years of combat decisions compressed into a split-second assessment. Trust Ethan's perception act, now validate later. He moved swiftly through the crowd toward the stage. Ms. Reed, don't open that briefcase. His voice cut through the presentation. All heads turned. Victoria froze the briefcase halfway extended toward her. Her assistant's face transformed from composed professionalism to cold calculation in an instant. Security personnel converged from all directions, but Jack reached the stage first, positioning himself between Victoria and the assistant. Step away from the briefcase, now. The assistant's hand moved toward her jacket. Jack reacted instantly, using his body to shield Victoria while simultaneously catching the assistant's wrist in a grip that immobilized her without causing injury. Security, this briefcase may be rigged, Jack called out, his voice carrying the unmistakable command of someone accustomed to crisis situations. Everything happened at once. The assistant twisted free with unexpected strength and bolted toward a side exit. Security personnel tackled her before she reached it. Others carefully secured the briefcase, calling for the bomb squad. Guests scattered in controlled panic as evacuation protocols activated. Through it all, Jack maintained his position, protecting Victoria, who stood remarkably composed despite the chaos. How did you know? She asked, her voice steady. Not me, my son. Jack turned, scanning the crowd for Ethan. Panic surged through him when he couldn't immediately locate the boy. Ethan, he found his son minutes later, curled behind a decorative column, hands pressed over his ears, despite the headphones rocking slightly as tears streamed down his face. The combination of tension, noise, and chaos had pushed him past his threshold. Jack knelt beside him, careful not to touch. You're safe, buddy. You did amazing. You saved lives tonight. Ethan didn't respond, lost in sensory overload. Jack settled on the floor beside him, creating a barrier between his son and the chaotic room, waiting patiently for the episode to pass. He'd learned long ago that these moments couldn't be rushed. Victoria appeared concern evident in her expression. She assessed the situation quickly, then spoke to a nearby security officer. Minutes later, they were escorted to a quiet office away from the commotion. In the relative peace, Ethan gradually calmed, his breathing steadying as the overwhelming sensory input receded. Jack remained beside him, a steady, silent presence, until Ethan finally spoke. Did I make a mistake? His voice was barely audible. No, buddy. You were exactly right. The bomb squad confirmed it. The briefcase contained an explosive device. Your observation saved many lives, including Ms. Reed's. Victoria, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, stepped forward. Your father is correct, Ethan. You saw what everyone else missed. That makes you extraordinary. Ethan didn't look at her, but his rocking slowed. I noticed patterns. It's just how my brain works. Well, your brain works remarkably. Victoria sat carefully across from them. The authorities need statements from both of you, but that can wait until Ethan is ready. Jack nodded gratefully. Thank you for understanding. I understand more than you might think. She hesitated. My nephew is on the spectrum. Not the same challenges as Ethan, but I recognize an episode when I see one. Before Jack could respond, a federal agent appeared at the doorway. Ms. Reed, we need you to come with us immediately. Your assistant, Amanda Quinn, she's not who she claimed to be. This appears to be part of a larger corporate espionage operation. Victoria's composure faltered for the first time. Amanda's been with me for 3 years. She's had access to everything. Which is why we need to debrief you now. We believe this may be connected to attempts to steal your encryption technology. The agent glanced at Jack and Ethan. We'll need statements from them as well, but it can wait until morning. Jack helped Ethan to his feet. We're heading home. He needs familiar surroundings to recover. Victoria nodded, understanding. Of course. She reached into her purse and extracted a business card, writing something on the back before handing it to Jack. My personal number. If you need anything at all, please call. What you both did tonight, I'm in your debt. As they left the building, reporters had already gathered outside. Jack shielded Ethan, declining to answer questions as they pushed through to his truck. The boy was nearly asleep on his feet, emotionally and physically drained from the night's events. On the drive home, Jack's phone began ringing incessantly. News outlets seeking statements, no doubt. He silenced it, focusing on getting his exhausted son safely home. The implications of what had happened would wait until morning. Ethan fell asleep in the truck, something that hadn't happened since he was much younger. Jack carried him inside, gently removing his shoes and tie before tucking him into bed. He stood watching his son sleep for a long moment, overwhelmed with both pride and concern. His son had potentially saved dozens of lives tonight with his remarkable perception. Yet Jack knew what would follow. Media attention questions, people wanting to study Ethan's gift without understanding the challenges that came with it. The quiet life they'd carefully constructed was about to be upended. Jack settled into the chair beside Ethan's bed, unwilling to leave him alone after the evening's trauma. His phone vibrated with a text message. Victoria Reed. Your payment has been processed with a significant bonus. More importantly, thank you both. You've given me much to consider about perception and what we miss when we discount those who experience the world differently. Jack smiled slightly, setting the phone aside. The money would secure Ethan's therapy, but Victoria's message held something perhaps more valuable. Recognition of his son's worth exactly as he was. Morning came with the expected media frenzy. Jack woke to find reporters camped outside their house, neighbors peering curiously from windows, and his phone filled with messages. Ethan stood at his bedroom window watching the commotion with uncharacteristic stillness. They want to talk about what happened, he said as Jack entered. About me. They can want all they like. We don't have to talk to anyone we don't choose to. Jack sat on the edge of the bed. How are you feeling this morning? My brain feels bruised. Ethan's hands twisted together. But also, proud. Is that the right feeling? It's exactly right. You should be proud. I certainly am. They ate breakfast with the curtains drawn, ignoring the doorbell when it rang. Jack called Ethan's school to explain his absence, then contacted Mike for advice on handling the press attention. By noon, the crowd outside had grown, making it clear they couldn't simply wait it out. Jack's phone rang. Victoria Reed. The media found you, I see. Her voice was calm but concerned. This will get worse before it gets better. Every news outlet wants the story of the boy hero who prevented a tech assassination. We're not interested in publicity. Jack watched Ethan retreat further into himself as someone knocked insistently at their door. But we can't hide in our house forever. I have a solution if you are willing to consider it. Victoria paused. I own a property in New Hampshire. Remote secure, fully stocked. No one knows about it. It's not in my name. You and Ethan could stay there until this dies down. Jack hesitated. Accepting help didn't come naturally to him, especially from someone he barely knew. Yet the thought of Ethan being subjected to the media circus outweighed his pride. Why would you do this for us? Because I owe you my life. Because your son reminds me that our differences can be our greatest strengths. Because I know what it's like to need escape when the world becomes too much. Victoria's voice softened. The choice is yours, but the offer stands. Jack looked at Ethan, who had retreated to his room, headphones firmly in place, as he rocked slightly on the edge of his bed. The decision crystallized instantly. Text me the address. We'll leave within the hour. An hour later, having slipped out through the backyard and driven 3 blocks to where Mike waited with his SUV, they were heading north toward the New Hampshire mountains. Ethan sat quietly in the back seat, a backpack of essentials clutched to his chest. Jack watched his son in the rearview mirror, noting the gradual relaxation in his posture as they left the city behind. Will Ms. Reed be at the house? Ethan asked suddenly. I don't know, buddy. Why? Because she needs safety too. Her assistant betrayed her. That hurts worse than strangers being dangerous. Ethan looked out the window at the passing landscape. And because she didn't look at me like I was broken, she looked at me like I was interesting. Jack exchanged glances with Mike, both men struck by the boy's insight. You're right, Eth. She probably does need safety too. 3 hours later, they turned onto a private road winding through dense pine forest. The property revealed itself gradually. A stunning timber and stone house nestled into the mountainside, large windows reflecting the surrounding wilderness. Victoria's car was already parked out front. She greeted them at the door, more casual than Jack had seen her, in jeans and a simple sweater, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Welcome to Evergreen. No reporters, no cameras, no expectations. Ethan approached the house, slowly taking in every detail. It feels quiet here, not just outside, but in the air, like the walls absorb sound instead of bouncing it. Victoria smiled. That's by design. The place was built with acoustics in mind, specialized insulation, strategic angles. There are 4 bedrooms upstairs, all with their own bathrooms. Take whichever feels most comfortable. Mike helped bring in their bags, then departed after extracting promises from Jack to call if they needed anything. As his taillights disappeared down the drive, Jack felt a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. They were safe from the media circus, but now what Victoria seemed to sense his question. There's a fully stocked kitchen. I thought we could make dinner together if that sounds all right. Sounds perfect. Jack turned to Ethan, who was examining the stone fireplace with fascination. What do you think, buddy? Should we check out our rooms first? Ethan nodded, still not making eye contact with either adult. I need to establish a perimeter and identify exit routes. Victoria's expression betrayed no surprise at this unusual statement from a 10-year-old. Smart thinking. The house has 3 exits, front door, back patio, and a side door off the kitchen. There's also a detailed map of the property in each bedroom. Jack followed Ethan upstairs, helping him choose a room with minimal visual stimulation and maximum natural light. As his son methodically arranged his belongings in the new space, Jack leaned against the doorframe watching. Okay to leave you alone while I talk with Ms. Reed about dinner. Yes, I need 17 minutes to organize. Ethan had already begun sorting his clothes with precise movements. Then I'll come downstairs and help. I want to be useful. You're always useful, Eth, just by being you. Downstairs, Jack found Victoria in the kitchen, ingredients already laid out on the counter. She looked up as he entered. I thought simple might be best. Pasta with marinara. I wasn't sure about Ethan's food preferences. Pasta works. He doesn't like foods that mix textures, casseroles, stews, that sort of thing, and nothing with visible herbs. Jack washed his hands at the sink. Thank you for this. I know it's not exactly what you signed up for when you hired a restoration expert. Life rarely gives us what we expect. Victoria began chopping onions with surprising skill. My security team thought it best I disappear for a few days as well. The investigation into Amanda, or whatever her real name is, has revealed connections to a larger corporate espionage network. Apparently, I've been targeted for some time. Must be difficult discovering someone you trusted was never who they claimed to be. Victoria's knife paused momentarily. 3 years. She knew everything about me, my schedule, my habits, my vulnerabilities. I'm supposed to be an expert in security, and I never suspected. The best deceptions are the ones that fit what we want to believe. No one is immune to that. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Jack taking over the sauce, while Victoria prepared a simple salad. It felt surprisingly natural, this domestic scene with a woman he barely knew. Perhaps it was the shared trauma of the previous night, or the remote setting, but something about Victoria Reed felt familiar, in a way Jack couldn't quite define. Ethan appeared exactly 17 minutes later as promised. He surveyed the kitchen, then moved to the table, beginning to set it without being asked. 3 places, equidistant napkins on the left, he murmured to himself, arranging everything with precise movements. Victoria watched him with undisguised interest. You're very organized, Ethan. I appreciate that quality. Organization creates predictability. Predictability reduces anxiety. Ethan continued his task without looking up. My therapist says I create external order to compensate for internal chaos, but I think that's backward. I think everyone else tolerates too much disorder in their environment. Jack smiled, recognizing his son's unique perspective. You might be right about that, buddy. Dinner proved surprisingly relaxed. Victoria asked Ethan thoughtful questions about his interests, never pushing when he retreated into silence, never showing impatience when his answers became lengthy technical monologues. Jack observed their interaction with growing appreciation for her approach to his son, not condescending or overly accommodating, just respectfully attentive. So you can actually hear electrical currents? Victoria asked as Ethan explained his sensory sensitivities. Only the irregular ones. Like the bracelet yesterday, it had a fault in the circuit that created an ultrasonic vibration. Ethan twirled pasta onto his fork with methodical precision. Most people can't hear above 20 kilohertz, but I can detect sounds up to 28 kilohertz. It's not always useful. Mostly it's just loud. I can imagine, though, it certainly proved useful last night. Victoria turned to Jack. Has he always had these abilities? As far back as we can tell, Sarah, my late wife, noticed when he was still a baby. He'd react to sounds or lights that didn't bother anyone else. Jack's expression softened at the memory. She was the one who pushed for proper diagnosis when doctors dismissed our concerns, said our son wasn't broken, just differently tuned. Your wife sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Elementary school teacher. She understood that different kids need different approaches. Jack cleared his throat, steering away from painful memories. What about you? Always been in security. Not exactly. I was an electrical engineer first. Built my first encryption algorithm in college, then realized the potential market value. Victoria's expression turned wistful. Sometimes I miss the hands-on work, solving practical problems instead of managing people who solve problems. I found a workshop, Ethan announced suddenly, behind the house. It has tools and a workbench. I saw it from my window. Victoria nodded. The previous owner was a furniture maker. I've kept most of his equipment, though I've never used it myself. Jack's interest piqued. Mind if I take a look after dinner? Be my guest. It might be nice to have it used again. Later, after Ethan had settled into bed following a modified version of his bedtime routine, Jack explored the workshop. The space was impressive, well equipped with quality tools, many of which he recognized as high-end brands. A half-finished project he had abandoned on the main workbench, what appeared to be an antique writing desk with water damage to one side. The owner died before finishing it, Victoria said from the doorway. Heart attack. His family didn't want it, so it stayed when I bought the property. Jack ran his hands along the damaged section, assessing. Shame to leave it unfinished. The craftsmanship is excellent. Could you finish it? Victoria stepped into the workshop. While we're here, it seems fitting. You're a restoration expert, and this place could use some restoration of its own. Jack looked up, struck by the symbolic weight of her suggestion. I'd like that. It would give me something productive to do, and Ethan could help. He's actually quite skilled with detail work when his hands are steady. Victoria settled onto a stool, watching as Jack continued to examine the desk. May I ask you something personal? You can ask, I might not answer. Fair enough. She hesitated. How do you do it? Raise a child with such complex needs on your own. I've watched my sister struggle with my nephew, and she has support resources, family help. Jack considered the question, recognizing genuine curiosity rather than pity. One day at a time, some days better than others. I learned to pick my battles, to distinguish between what Ethan can't do versus what he simply does differently. He paused. And I remind myself that the world is harder on him than he is on the world. You make it sound simple. It's not, but it's necessary. After Sarah died, Ethan and I had to relearn everything together. New routines, new coping mechanisms. We became each other's constant in a world that suddenly made even less sense. Jack looked directly at Victoria. What about you? Running a tech security empire can't be simple either. It's not, she smiled slightly, but like you said, it's necessary. I built Reed Secure to protect people's digital lives because I understand how valuable privacy is. Now I find myself wondering if I've been so focused on protecting data that I've neglected the human element. Amanda. Yes. Victoria's expression darkened. I trusted algorithms and background checks more than my own instincts. That nearly got me killed. Their conversation was interrupted by a sound from the house, Ethan calling for his father. Jack recognized the edge of panic in his son's voice and moved immediately. Coming, buddy. He found Ethan standing in the hallway, disoriented and breathing rapidly. The shadows are wrong. I woke up and didn't know where I was. You're at Ms. Reed's house in New Hampshire, remember? We came here to get away from the reporters. Jack kept his voice calm, steady. Would it help to go through our location checklist? Ethan nodded, his breathing still too fast. Jack guided him through their familiar routine, identifying 5 things he could see, 4 he could touch, 3 he could hear, 2 he could smell, 1 he could taste. Gradually, Ethan's panic subsided. Victoria appeared with a glass of water, offering it without comment. Ethan accepted it, taking small sips as he continued to settle. I'm sorry, he said, finally looking at the floor. No need to apologize, Victoria replied. New places are challenging. When I was about your age, I couldn't sleep in hotel rooms. The air felt wrong. Ethan glanced up briefly. Did you get better at it? Eventually, I learned to bring familiar objects with me. A small pillow, a specific book. things that made strange places feel connected to home. My calm rock is in my other pants. I forgot to transfer it. Ethan looked genuinely distressed by this oversight. Victoria considered this, then disappeared briefly into her room. She returned holding a small, smooth stone with unusual striations. This is my worry stone. I've carried it since college. Would it help to borrow it tonight? Ethan stared at the offered stone, then carefully accepted it. It has a good weight, and the texture is interesting. He ran his finger along the striations. Thank you. You're welcome. Good night, Ethan. As Jack tucked his son back into bed, he felt a wave of appreciation for Victoria's intuitive understanding. She hadn't offered false reassurances or dismissed Ethan's distress. Instead, she'd offered a practical solution that respected his needs. When Jack returned to the hallway, Victoria was waiting. Is he all right? He will be. Change is hard for him, even necessary change. Jack ran a hand through his hair, suddenly aware of his own exhaustion. Thank you for the stone. That was thoughtful. I meant what I said. I understand more than you might think. Victoria smiled slightly. Get some rest, Jack. Tomorrow will be easier. As Jack settled into his own bed, he found himself thinking about Victoria Reed. She was not what he'd expected. The powerful CEO had shown compassion, understanding, and vulnerability that contrasted sharply with her professional persona. There was depth to her that intrigued him, layers that reminded him that people were rarely as simple as they first appeared. Just before sleep claimed him, his phone buzzed with a news alert. The story of the averted attack had exploded across national media. Their names weren't mentioned, but the article described a furniture restorer and his young son who had prevented a potential tragedy. It was only a matter of time before their identities became public. Jack set the phone aside, closing his eyes. For now, at least they were safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight in this quiet mountain refuge, they had found unexpected sanctuary, not just from the media, but from a world that too often misunderstood both his son's remarkable mind and his own determined heart. Morning light spilled through the windows of evergreen, casting geometric patterns across the hardwood floors. Jack stood at the bedroom window, watching the mist rise from the pines. After years of military-honed vigilance, followed by the hyper-awareness required to parent Ethan, sleeping past 6 felt like an indulgence bordering on dereliction. Yet his son's bedroom remained quiet, an unprecedented development that left Jack both relieved and slightly disoriented. He moved silently through the upstairs hallway, pausing at Ethan's partially open door. The boy slept peacefully, Victoria's worry stone still clutched in his palm. Jack studied his son's face, relaxed in sleep in a way it rarely was during waking hours. The constant processing, analyzing, and filtering that characterized Ethan's interaction with the world momentarily suspended. Downstairs, the scent of coffee guided him to the kitchen, where he found the pot freshly brewed, but no sign of Victoria. Through the back windows, he spotted her on the deck, steam rising from her mug as she gazed at the mountains. She'd clearly been up for some time, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair gathered in a loose ponytail. Jack poured himself coffee and joined her outside. The morning air carried the sharp scent of pine and the distant call of birds, a world away from the chaos they'd left behind in Boston. Ethan's still sleeping. Victoria offered the question without turning from her contemplation of the distant peaks. A first in recent memory. Jack settled against the railing. Your stone worked its magic. Some things ground us when everything else shifts. Victoria's gaze remained fixed on the mountains. The FBI called at 5 this morning. They've identified Amanda. Her fingers tightened around her mug. Real name Natalia Sorokin, former Russian intelligence operative recruited by Quantum Data Corporation 3 years ago, specifically to infiltrate my company. Jack processed this information automatically, military training kicking in to assess threat levels and potential vectors. Quantum Data is your main competitor. More like the antithesis of everything Reed Secure stands for. Victoria's voice hardened. They harvest user data, sell privacy vulnerabilities to the highest bidder, provide backdoors to governments and corporations alike. Our quantum encryption protocol would have rendered their entire business model obsolete. Her knuckles whitened around her mug. I should have seen it, Jack. 3 years. She sat 10 feet from my office every day for 3 years. The best infiltrators become precisely what you expect to see. Jack recognized the self-recrimination in her voice. You couldn't have known. I'm paid to know. Victoria turned toward him, vulnerability and anger intertwined in her expression. To anticipate threats, to recognize patterns, to protect data. Your 10-year-old son spent 5 minutes in a room with her and saw what I missed after 1,000 days. Before Jack could respond, the sliding door opened. Ethan stood in the threshold, Victoria's worrystone clutched in his palm. Despite the unfamiliar surroundings and previous night's disorientation, he looked remarkably centered, eyes clear, posture steady. They'll try again, he stated, his quiet voice carrying in the morning stillness. Bad patterns don't stop unless they're completely blocked. Victoria straightened, studying Ethan with renewed intensity. What makes you say that, Ethan? The woman Amanda, not Amanda, she was just one piece. Ethan stepped onto the deck, maintaining his careful distance from both adults. Like in chess, you don't just move one piece, you have a whole strategy. His fingers worked methodically over the worrystone's surface. Dad says when people want something badly enough, they keep trying different approaches until they succeed. Jack recognized the strategic principle he'd explained to Ethan once after a particularly difficult school interaction. His son's ability to apply concepts across entirely different contexts never ceased to amaze him. Victoria nodded, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. Quantum data has resources, motivation, and apparently few ethical boundaries. The FBI believes they've been targeting my company for over a year, system infiltration attempts, trying to recruit my engineers, now this. So what's the plan? Jack drained his coffee. We can't hide on this mountain forever, as peaceful as it is. My security team wants me at a secure location until they identify all possible threats. Victoria's expression hardened with determination. But I'm done running. Quantum data wants my encryption protocol. Let's give them something else entirely. Ethan looked up, sudden interest, breaking through his usual reserve. A trap? Exactly. Victoria's smile transformed her face, revealing the strategic mind that had built her empire. I'm announcing a public demonstration of the protocol at our Boston headquarters next week. The real protocol will remain secure at an undisclosed location, but we'll put out something that looks legitimate enough to bait whoever's running this operation. Using yourself as bait is risky. Jack's tactical assessment kicked in automatically. Quantum data has already demonstrated they're willing to kill, which is exactly why I need your help. Victoria looked directly at Jack, then Ethan. Both of you. Ethan's fingers worked nervously over the stone surface. You want me to look for bad patterns again? Only if you're willing. Victoria knelt to Ethan's eye level without invading his space, a gesture that impressed Jack with its intuitive understanding of his son's boundaries. Your father and I would create a safe observation post with noise-canceling equipment, limited sensory input, and a clear exit strategy. But only if you choose this, Ethan. This isn't your fight. Jack felt a surge of protective instinct. Victoria, I can't intentionally put my son in danger. I want to help. Ethan's voice was small but determined. The patterns are important. They hurt people when nobody sees them. Jack recognized the stubborn set of Ethan's jaw, an expression so like Sarah's when she'd made up her mind about something. Buddy, this isn't a school art class. These people are dangerous. I know. That's why they need to be stopped. Ethan turned the worrystone over in his hands. Mom always said people with gifts should use them to help others. I have a gift, Dad, even if it makes things hard sometimes. A complex wave of emotions washed over Jack, pride in his son's courage, fear for his safety, and grief at hearing Sarah's words echo through Ethan. He'd spent years protecting Ethan from a world that didn't understand him, but perhaps he'd also been sheltering him from opportunities to find meaning in his differences. We'll need extensive planning, security protocols, safe words, escape routes, contingency plans for every scenario. Jack turned to Victoria, steel in his voice. And if at any point I say we're out, we're out. No discussion. Agreed. Victoria extended her hand formally to Ethan. Partners, then. Ethan studied her hand for a long moment before reaching out with his own, a monumental gesture for a boy who rarely initiated physical contact. Partners. After breakfast, Victoria set up secure communications with her team while Jack and Ethan explored the property. The crisp mountain air and natural environment seemed to invigorate Ethan, whose curiosity emerged without the usual overlay of anxiety that characterized his interactions in more stimulating environments. They hiked along a well-maintained trail through the pine forest, Ethan stopping periodically to examine interesting rock formations or identify bird calls. Dad, Ethan knelt beside a mountain stream watching water patterns over smooth stones. This house wasn't built for Ms. Reed. Jack settled on a nearby boulder, giving Ethan space while remaining close enough for conversation. What do you mean, buddy? It's built for someone with sensory issues. The acoustic design, the lighting systems, the way the spaces transition. Ethan traced patterns in the wet sand along the stream bank. Ms. Reed doesn't have sensory processing disorder, but she built this place for someone who does. Jack considered this insight. Maybe her nephew, she mentioned he's on the spectrum. No, it's older than that. Ethan's fingers stilled on the sand, and the workshop tools, they were her father's, not the previous owners, like she said. She touches them like they're memories. Once again, Jack marveled at his son's perception. While most people saw Ethan's challenges, Jack witnessed the profound gifts that came with his unique neurology. You see a lot that others miss, buddy. I can't help it. Patterns are everywhere, shouting to be noticed. Ethan stood brushing sand from his fingers. Sometimes I wish I could turn it off, like normal people. Normal is overrated. Jack rose beside him. And for what it's worth, I think Ms. Reed appreciates that you notice things others don't. When they returned to the house, they found Victoria in the kitchen preparing lunch, simple sandwiches with ingredients separated on Ethan's plate, just as Jack had mentioned he preferred. The thoughtfulness of the gesture wasn't lost on Jack. I spoke with my team, Victoria said as they ate. They're setting up everything according to our specifications. The announcement about the demonstration goes out tomorrow morning. What's your security presence like at headquarters? Jack asked, automatically assessing potential vulnerabilities. 24 agents rotating shifts, full building lockdown capabilities, advanced surveillance. Victoria met his gaze directly. But what we really need is someone who can spot what doesn't belong, behavioral patterns, anomalies, inconsistencies. Someone like me, Ethan said, carefully assembling his sandwich with methodical precision. Victoria nodded. Exactly like you, if you're still willing. After lunch, Ethan retreated to his room for what he called processing time, a necessary break to recharge his sensory batteries. Jack used the opportunity to explore the workshop behind the house more thoroughly. The space was impressive, well-equipped with quality tools arranged with the same precision Ethan would appreciate. The half-finished writing desk sat on the main workbench, its water-damaged section a stark contrast to the otherwise exquisite craftsmanship. My father's tools. Victoria's voice came from the doorway. Not the previous owners. You notice Ethan did, actually. Jack ran his hand along the damaged section of the desk. You inherited his technical aptitude, among other things. Victoria stepped into the workshop, her presence altering the space in subtle ways. He was brilliant MIT, educated engineer, inventor, or always building or fixing something. But he couldn't fix everything. Jack continued his assessment of the desk, giving her space to continue or not. Sometimes silence created the room people needed to share difficult truths. My mother had what we now recognize as a combination of bipolar disorder and sensory processing issues. In the 80s, they just called her difficult or high-strung. Victoria picked up a finely crafted chisel, turning it over in her hands. When her mental health deteriorated, my father retreated to his workshop, lost himself in projects while I became her caretaker at 14. The revelation explains so much: Victoria's self-reliance, her controlled demeanor, her unexpected understanding of Ethan's needs. That's why you built Reed Secure. Protection when systems fail. Protection I couldn't give her to you. Victoria replaced the chisel with careful precision. I built this house with acoustic dampening and sensory considerations because that's what she needed and never got. She died thinking the world was conspiring against her, when really it was just too loud, too bright, too much. Jack recognized the weight of old regrets in her voice. You were a child yourself. You did what you could. As did you after Sarah died. Victoria's perceptiveness, it startled him. Ethan told me this morning about the cancer, how quickly it progressed, how you learned everything about sensory processing disorder while grieving your wife. That takes exceptional strength, Jack. Or exceptional fear of failing someone who depends on you completely. The admission surprised even Jack. Every day I worry I'm not enough. that Sarah would have known better how to help him navigate the world. Yet here you are helping him use his gifts rather than hide them. Victoria's gaze held his something shifting in her expression. That's courage most parents never find regardless of their children's needs. Jack turned his attention back to the desk, uncomfortable with both the praise and the increasing pull he felt toward Victoria. This desk could be restored. The damage is significant, but not beyond repair. Could you finish it? Victoria asked, accepting his redirection. While we're here, I mean, seems fitting, a restoration expert restoring what was abandoned. The symbolism wasn't lost on Jack. I'd like that, and Ethan could help. He's surprisingly good with detail work when his hands are steady. They spent the afternoon developing protocols for the upcoming operation. Jack brought both his military expertise and intimate knowledge of Ethan's needs, while Victoria contributed her security background and company knowledge. They mapped contingencies, exit strategies, and communication systems on the large dining table, occasionally interrupted by Ethan's insightful questions or observations as he drifted in and out of their planning. By evening, Jack felt the familiar tension building in his shoulders, the weight of responsibility, the constant awareness that any oversight could lead to disaster. He found himself back in the workshop after dinner, methodically organizing tools as Ethan prepared for bed, a coping mechanism he'd developed during particularly stressful deployments. His phone buzzed with a text from Mike Peterson, and Jack stepped outside to take the call. The media found your general location, brother. Not the specific property yet, but they know you're somewhere in the White Mountains. Mike's voice carried the tension of someone delivering unwelcome news. And that's not all. Some reporter got access to Ethan's school records. They're running stories framing him as some kind of child savant who prevented a terrorist attack. Jack's hand tightened around the phone. Those records are sealed. They had no right. Money opens a lot of doors, and this story's got everything. Heroism, a special needs kid, corporate espionage. The vultures are circling. Mike paused. There's something else. Someone's been asking very specific questions about your military service. About Kandahar. Ice settled in Jack's stomach. The operation that had haunted his dreams for years, the intelligence failure that had led to civilian casualties, the investigation that had cleared him officially while leaving his conscience forever scarred. Who's asking? Anonymous tips to reporters. They're digging into the incident report, looking for angles. Could be quantum data trying to discredit you before the demonstration. Or pressure me to back out. Jack watched through the window as Victoria worked on her laptop in the living room, unaware of this new threat. Anything about Sarah or Ethan's adoption? Not yet, but I've put out some countermeasures called in favors from guys who owe us. We're monitoring. Mike's voice lowered. Jack, if they are digging into Kandahar, they might find the connection to Ethan. The connection that nobody knew that Ethan's birth mother had been Afghan killed during a separate military action. That Jack had found the orphaned infant and spent 2 years navigating international adoption protocols to bring him home to Sarah. That his guilt over civilian casualties had driven his determination to give at least one child a future. Keep me posted. Jack ended the call, dread settling like lead in his chest. He found Victoria still working in the living room, face illuminated by her laptop as the evening shadows lengthened. She looked up as he approached, immediately reading the tension in his posture. What's happened? Quantum data is getting desperate. Jack settled into a chair across from her. They're digging into my military background, looking for leverage. Victoria's expression hardened. Let me guess, Kandahar. Jack stared at her, shock momentarily overriding caution. How do you know about that? I don't specifically, but you have the look of someone carrying old battlefield wounds. Victoria closed her laptop. I've worked with enough veterans to recognize the signs of an operation gone wrong. Something that doesn't show up in official reports but weighs on the soul. The simplicity of her assessment disarmed him. Most people either glorified military service or condemned its excesses, rarely understanding the complex reality between. Intelligence failure. A family died because of information we were given. Jack hadn't spoken of it in years, not even to Mike. I was cleared by the investigation, but clearing paperwork doesn't clear conscience. Victoria nodded, offering neither hollow comfort nor judgment. And now quantum data wants to use it against you. Against Ethan, more likely. Media's already accessed his school records, painting him as some miracle child. Jack's jaw tightened. If they connect Kandahar to his adoption, they'll turn it into a redemption narrative, exploit his differences for ratings. Everything I've tried to protect him from. Then we accelerate. Victoria's decisive nature emerged in crisis. Move the demonstration to tomorrow instead of Wednesday. Quantum data won't expect it, and the media won't have time to compile their hit pieces. That's not enough time to prepare Ethan. What he needs is to complete this mission before his privacy is completely shattered. Victoria's voice carried absolute conviction. My team can be ready by tomorrow afternoon. Can yours? Jack recognized the logic in her strategy, even as his protective instincts resisted. I need to talk to Ethan first. This has to be his choice. He found his son in his bedroom, meticulously reorganizing his backpack contents, a self-soothing behavior Jack recognized from countless school mornings and therapy sessions. Jack sat on the edge of the bed, giving Ethan space while remaining close enough for conversation. Hey, buddy, there's been a change of plans. The bad people are trying to find information about us, about your school records, about my military service. Ethan's hand stilled. They want to make you not help Ms. Reed. Yes, and they're going to write stories about you that might make things difficult when we go home. Jack chose his words carefully, balancing truth with age-appropriate explanation. Ms. Reed thinks we should move the demonstration to tomorrow instead of waiting. Ethan resumed his organizing, but Jack recognized it as processing behavior rather than avoidance. Less preparation time, higher stress variables, increased likelihood of sensory overload. That's right, which is why this has to be your decision. Jack maintained eye contact as Ethan glanced up. If you want to back out, we can. No one would blame you. Would the bad people win? Maybe, maybe not. Ms. Reed would find another man. Ethan considered this with the logical precision that characterized his thinking, but I would know I had a chance to help and didn't take it because I was scared. Being scared is reasonable when facing dangerous situations, Ethan. It's not a failure. Being scared isn't the problem. Ethan zipped his backpack with finality. Running away because you're scared is. You taught me that. Once again, Jack found himself humbled by his son's courage. For all Ethan's challenges navigating the everyday world, he possessed a moral clarity that many adults lacked. Then we do it tomorrow, but you remember our safe word, right? Red lighthouse. Ethan nodded. And you'll be with me the whole time. The whole time, Jack promised, wondering if he could keep that promise against whatever quantum data had planned. Victoria set things in motion immediately, her team implementing the accelerated timeline with military precision. By morning, they were packed and ready to return to Boston, the sanctuary of Evergreen reluctantly left behind. The drive back was tense with anticipation. Jack, Victoria, and Ethan traveled in her security team's unmarked SUV, taking back roads to avoid potential surveillance. Ethan sat between them in the backseat, headphones on, methodically reviewing printouts of the building layout and security camera positions. Victoria's phone buzzed with updates from her team. Security reports no unusual activity at headquarters. Media got wind of the schedule change, but they're attributing it to technical considerations, not security concerns. And quantum data, Jack kept his voice level for Ethan's sake. Their CEO issued a statement congratulating us on the breakthrough, hoping for a successful demonstration of this revolutionary technology. Standard corporate doublespeak. Victoria's expression hardened. But 3 known quantum data consultants have been tracked entering Boston in the last 12 hours. They took the bait. Jack glanced at Ethan, who continued studying his materials, apparently absorbed but likely processing every word. What about the real encryption protocol? Secure at our auxiliary facility in Portland. What we're demonstrating today is a sophisticated simulation, enough technical elements to seem legitimate, but ultimately useless to anyone who steals it. Victoria's strategic mind continued to impress Jack. The trap isn't just identifying who quantum data sends, it's proving corporate espionage definitively by catching them in the act. They arrived at Reed Secure headquarters through the underground parking garage, bypassing the media gathering at the main entrance. Victoria's security chief, a former Secret Service agent named Donovan, met them at the elevator. Building secure, ma'am. All personnel verified with biometric confirmation. Observation room is prepped to Mr. Sullivan's specifications. Donovan nodded respectfully to Jack and Ethan. FBI has a cyber team monitoring all communications in and out of the building. If quantum data makes a move, we'll have them. Victoria led them through secure corridors to the observation suite where Ethan would monitor the demonstration. The room had been transformed according to the specifications Jack had provided: indirect lighting, sound dampening panels, ergonomic seating, and most importantly, a wall of monitors displaying feeds from every security camera in the building. Ethan approached the setup with obvious fascination. 37 camera feeds, all controllable from this station, complete pan, tilt, and zoom capabilities. Donovan demonstrated the simplified control panel they'd created for Ethan. And these monitors show heat signatures from the thermal imaging system. Jack inspected every aspect of the room from the emergency exit to the communication systems. Years of military planning had taught him to anticipate worst-case scenarios, and with Ethan's safety at stake, he left nothing to chance. Demonstration begins in 90 minutes. Victoria checked her watch. I need to brief the technical team and speak with the media representatives. Will you both be okay here? Jack nodded, already helping Ethan set up his monitoring station. We'll be fine. Just make sure Donovan's team is ready to move the moment Ethan identifies anything suspicious. As Victoria left, Ethan settled into the chair before the monitors, adjusting his headset with practiced precision. I can see everyone, Dad, all the patterns. That's right, buddy. You're our eyes today. Jack placed a reassuring hand near but not on Ethan's shoulder. Remember, you don't need to understand everything you see. Just notice what doesn't match the normal patterns. For the next hour, Ethan studied the monitors with intense concentration, occasionally asking Jack to adjust a camera angle or zoom in on particular individuals. Jack marveled at his son's ability to process so much visual information simultaneously, a talent that overwhelmed most neurotypical observers. The security guards by the east entrance are different. Ethan pointed to a monitor showing two uniformed men checking credentials at a doorway. They move wrong. Jack studied the men, noting subtle inconsistencies in their posture and behavior. Good catch. What seems off about them? Real guards scan IDs in the same pattern every time. Left to right, then top to bottom. Ethan's finger traced the movement on screen. These ones are just pretending to look, and they stand too close together. Real partners maintain optimal distance for response positioning. Jack relayed this observation to Donovan through their secure channel, watching as security personnel discreetly approached the suspicious guards. Within minutes, both men were quietly detained and escorted to a secure holding area. First attempt identified and neutralized. Donovan's voice came through Jack's earpiece. Preliminary ID confirms quantum data contractors using forged credentials. Well spotted. Ethan didn't acknowledge the praise, already focused on other monitors. Woman with the catering staff. Brown hair, blue uniform. She's not handling food correctly. Again, Jack relayed the information, and again, security moved smoothly to intercept the imposter. As the demonstration time approached, Ethan identified two more infiltrators, a fake tech journalist and a maintenance worker accessing restricted areas. They're getting desperate. Jack noted the increasing recklessness of the infiltration attempts. This is too easy. Victoria's voice came through his earpiece. Almost like they want us focusing on these obvious attempts while something else happens. The realization hit Jack simultaneously. It's a distraction. Ethan checked the loading dock cameras. Ethan immediately brought up the feeds from the building's rear loading area. Nothing seemed immediately amiss: workers moving equipment, security personnel at their post-delivery vehicles being inspected before entry. Wait. Ethan zoomed in on a delivery truck that had just passed inspection. The manifest. The guard scanned it but didn't really read it. The driver's hand covered part of the document, deliberate obscurement technique. Jack felt the familiar surge of adrenaline from his combat days. Donovan, we need a team at the loading dock now. Something's coming in on that delivery truck. Already dispatched. Donovan's response was immediate. What are we looking for? Unknown. Possibly technical equipment to compromise the demonstration. Ethan, keep watching that truck. The loading dock erupted into controlled chaos as Victoria's security teams surrounded the vehicle. The driver appeared confused, protesting as guards ordered him to step away from the truck. A security technician approached with scanning equipment while others maintained a perimeter. They found something. Ethan pointed to the thermal imaging display where security personnel had clustered around what appeared to be a large crate. Temperature variance into the container. Something's generating heat inside. Jack watched tensely as the security team carefully opened the crate, revealing sophisticated electronic equipment. Through his earpiece, he heard Donovan's assessment: signal jamming technology, powerful enough to disrupt all communications in the building, would have blocked our security systems during the demonstration, creating a blind spot for their main operation. Victoria's voice came through cool and controlled. The demonstration proceeds as planned. We've identified their technical attack vector. Now we wait for whoever's running this operation to show themselves. As the scheduled time approached, guests and media representatives gathered in the main presentation hall. Jack watched through the security feeds as Victoria took the stage, poised and confident in a tailored suit that projected authority. From their secured observation room, Ethan monitored every screen with unwavering focus, his fingers occasionally adjusting camera angles for better views. "Dad, there's someone new." Ethan pointed to a monitor showing the executive entrance. Man in the gray suit with the silver tie pin. He arrived with the venture capital group, but doesn't move like them. Jack studied the figure, distinguished, late 50s, moving with the confident ease of someone accustomed to power. "Can you get a clearer image of his face?" Ethan zoomed the camera, bringing the man's features into sharp focus. Jack immediately relayed the image to Donovan for identification. "That's Richard Blackwood." Donovan's voice held surprise. CEO of Quantum Data himself, he wasn't on any guest list. Victoria, receiving this information through her earpiece, showed no reaction as she continued her presentation. Her voice carried throughout the observation room as she approached the climax of her demonstration. Today represents more than a technological breakthrough. It represents a fundamental shift in how we approach data security. She gestured to the equipment behind her. What you are about to witness is the future of privacy protection, quantum encryption that cannot be broken by conventional means. Jack watched Blackwood's face on the monitor as Victoria began the technical demonstration. The Quantum Data CEO maintained a polite expression, but his eyes tracked every movement, every detail with predatory intensity. "He's recording," Ethan pointed to Blackwood's tie pin. "The light pattern indicates an active camera, and he keeps adjusting it for better angles." Donovan Blackwood's wearing surveillance equipment disguised as a tie pin. Jack's tension mounted as he watched the demonstration unfold on multiple screens. He's documenting the entire encryption process. "Hold position," Donovan responded. "We need him to make a clear attempt to access or compromise the system before we can move. Otherwise, he'll claim he was just an interested competitor observing a public demonstration." Victoria seamlessly incorporated this information into her presentation, subtly altering technical details as she explained the encryption protocol, feeding Blackwood carefully crafted misinformation while appearing to reveal proprietary methods. "The final phase requires direct interface with our quantum processor." Victoria approached the sleek black device at the center of the stage. "This generates the encryption key that makes our protocol fundamentally unbreakable." Ethan suddenly sat forward, his body tensing. Dad, Blackwood is sending a message. His phone, he's triggering something. Almost simultaneously, alarms blared throughout the building. Emergency lights flashed as the security system detected a breach. "Fire alarm in the East Wing," Donovan reported, causing evacuation protocols to activate. Jack immediately grasped the strategy. It's cover for accessing the demonstration equipment during the evacuation. Ethan, keep eyes on Blackwood. The presentation hall erupted into controlled movement as security began directing guests toward designated exits. Victoria remained on stage, appearing to secure the equipment while covertly watching Blackwood's movements. "He's not leaving." Ethan's voice held the focused clarity that emerged in crisis situations. "Everyone else is moving toward exits. He's moving toward the stage." Through the cameras, Jack watched as Blackwood broke from the evacuating crowd, smoothly approaching the demonstration equipment while security personnel were occupied with the evacuation. Victoria pretended not to notice, deliberately turning her back as she appeared to shut down systems. "He's reaching for something in his pocket." Ethan zoomed the camera tighter. "USB device? He's going to steal the protocol." "We've got him." Donovan's voice was triumphant. "Clear corporate espionage attempt. Moving to intercept." Security personnel converged on Blackwood just as he reached for the quantum processor. His expression transformed from confident calculation to shock as agents surrounded him, one smoothly removing the recording device from his tie pin, while another confiscated the USB device from his hand. Victoria turned to face him, her professional mask dropping to reveal steel underneath. Richard, how unexpected to see you take such a personal interest in our demonstration. The FBI cyber team monitoring from adjacent offices confirmed what they'd witnessed. We've got everything. The false fire alarm trigger from his phone, the recording device, the attempted data theft. Quantum data is finished. As security escorted Blackwood from the building, Jack felt the tension drain from his shoulders. Ethan, however, remained rigidly focused on the monitors. Something's not right, he insisted. The patterns aren't resolving. What do you mean, buddy? We caught Blackwood in the act. The FBI has all the evidence they need. It was too easy. Ethan's fingers flew across the control panel, switching between camera feeds with increasing urgency. He's too smart to get caught this way. Unless, understanding dawned in Jack's mind, unless getting caught was part of the plan. Dad checked the server room. Ethan brought up the feed from Reed Secure's main data center. During the evacuation, who went in? The footage showed technical staff evacuating as alarms sounded, but one figure entered rather than exited, a woman in a lab coat moving with purposeful efficiency toward the main server racks. That's Dr. Elise Werner. Victoria's voice came through their earpieces, tight with betrayal. My head of research and development. She has complete access to our systems. Jack felt ice in his veins. Blackwood was the distraction. The real theft is happening right now. Security to the server room now, Donovan ordered, but Ethan was already switching to live footage. Too late, she's already leaving. The camera showed Werner exiting the server room, nothing visibly different except a slight bulge in her lab coat pocket. She took something. Small data device. All units detain Dr. Elise Werner immediately. Donovan's voice was tense with urgency. Last seen exiting the main server room, heading toward the east stairwell. They watched through the security cameras as Werner moved through the building with the confident ease of someone who belonged there. When security approached, she showed credentials pointed toward evacuation routes, all while continuing her steady progress toward the exits. She's going to make it out. Jack felt the familiar frustration of watching an operation unravel. She knows all the security protocols. Not all of them. Victoria's voice held new determination. Emergency Containment Protocol Alpha. Authorization Read 7 Delta 9. Throughout the building, heavy security doors slammed into place, sealing all exits. Evacuation lights shifted from standard emergency patterns to a distinctive blue pulse that Jack recognized from the security briefings as indicating lockdown rather than evacuation. Werner's composed demeanor cracked as she found her path blocked. Security personnel converged from multiple directions, no longer deceived by her credentials or authority. Got her, Donovan confirmed. Corner of the east corridor, attempting to access the emergency exit. Teams moving to detain. As they watched Werner's capture on the monitors, Jack felt Ethan relax beside him for the first time in hours. The patterns resolved. Balance restored. Jack placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder, an unusual contact that Ethan accepted in the moment of triumph. You did it, buddy. You saw what everyone missed. Again. We did it. Ethan's correction was immediate. Partners remember. Victoria joined them in the observation room 30 minutes later after overseeing the securing of evidence in coordination with FBI agents. She looked simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated, her corporate polish slightly disheveled by the day's events. Werner confessed immediately when confronted with the evidence. She's been working for Quantum Data for over a year, gradually gathering intelligence on our encryption research. Victoria sank into a chair beside them. Blackwood's arrest was a calculated sacrifice. He knew getting caught in a minor corporate espionage attempt would result in fines and bad publicity, but nothing catastrophic. Meanwhile, Werner would escape with our complete research database. Except she didn't count on Ethan. Jack couldn't keep the pride from his voice. No one ever does. Victoria smiled at Ethan, who was methodically shutting down his monitoring station, task complete. The FBI has everything they need for a comprehensive case against Quantum Data. Corporate espionage, attempted theft of trade secrets, conspiracy. Their stock is already plummeting as news breaks. And Reed Secure, Jack asked. Stronger than ever. The real encryption protocol remains secure, our reputation for security enhanced, and our most significant competitor effectively neutralized. Victoria's expression softened as she watched Ethan. All thanks to a 10-year-old boy who sees what others miss. Ethan finished his shutdown procedure, turning to face them with unusual directness. What happens now? Do we go back to the mountain house? Victoria glanced at Jack, then back to Ethan. That depends on what you both want. The media will eventually lose interest in this story, especially with the quantum data scandal taking center stage. You could return to your normal lives in time. Or Jack sensed an unspoken alternative in her tone. Or you could consider a different path. Victoria chose her words carefully. Reed Secure could use someone with your restoration skills, Jack. And we definitely need Ethan's perceptual abilities. I'm establishing a new division focused on human-centered security, recognizing that technology alone isn't enough when people are often the vulnerability. The offer hung in the air between them, not just employment, but a fundamental life change. Jack studied Victoria's expression, seeing beyond the business proposition to the personal invitation underneath. That would be a significant change for Ethan. New school, new routines, new environment. Jack's protective instincts remained strong despite the day's successes. I've thought about that. Victoria's thoroughness impressed him yet again. Reed Secure has a partnership with the Brighton Academy Progressive Education focused on each child's specific learning style. They have an exceptional program for neurodivergent students integrated into mainstream classrooms with appropriate supports. Ethan, who had been listening intently, spoke up. I'd like to visit the school before deciding, see their patterns, assess compatibility variables. Of course, Victoria's smile held genuine warmth. No decisions need to be made immediately. Take whatever time you need. Later, as they prepared to leave the building, Jack found himself standing with Victoria in her office, Boston's evening skyline glittering beyond the windows. The day's events had shifted something between them, crisis-forging connection in ways ordinary interaction rarely achieved. Thank you. Jack's words felt inadequate for the magnitude of what had transpired. Not just for the offer, but for seeing Ethan's value from the beginning, for treating him as capable rather than damaged. I meant what I said about different not being defective. Victoria moved closer, professional distance, giving way to something more personal. Your son reminded me of that. So did you. We make an interesting team. Jack felt the pull between them, the shared understanding, the complementary strengths, the mutual respect that had developed through danger and triumph. We do. Victoria's gaze held his unguarded for perhaps the first time since they'd met. Partners, as Ethan would say. Jack thought of the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a chance restoration job to foiling corporate espionage, from protecting his son from the world to helping him engage with it meaningfully. Whatever path they chose moving forward, nothing would be the same. Partners, he agreed, the word containing possibilities neither had anticipated when their paths first crossed. As they left the building, Ethan, walking slightly ahead with Donovan, Jack noticed his son's posture, straighter, more confident, less defensive, against a world that had so often overwhelmed him. Today, Ethan had not just coped with that world, he had helped protect it using the very differences that usually set him apart. 3 months passed before a decision was made. Jack had insisted on taking time to ensure Ethan fully understood what a move would mean: new routines, new environments, new challenges. They visited Brighton Academy twice, Ethan methodically cataloging everything from the acoustic properties of the classrooms to the patterns of student movement between classes. They toured potential neighborhoods, considering proximity to the school's sensory environments and escape routes, a habit Jack couldn't shake from his military days. Meanwhile, the media storm had gradually subsided. The quantum data scandal dominated business headlines for weeks as more details of their corporate espionage operation emerged. Richard Blackwood resigned in disgrace, eventually reaching a plea deal with federal prosecutors. Dr. Werner faced more serious charges, having violated multiple security protocols and confidentiality agreements. Jack and Ethan had temporarily moved into a Reed Secure corporate apartment, a carefully neutral territory, while they considered Victoria's offer. Jack continued work on the antique writing desk, having transported it from Evergreen to a small workshop space Victoria had arranged for him. The restoration became a metaphor for their transition, patient work, bringing new life to something damaged but valuable. I decided, Ethan announced one evening as Jack prepared dinner in the apartment's kitchen. The boy stood in the doorway, hands clasped behind his back, a posture he adopted when making important declarations. Jack set down the spatula, giving his son his full attention. About Boston. Yes, I want to stay. The school's sensory management protocols are excellent, and their science curriculum includes actual quantum computing concepts. Ethan maintained eye contact longer than usual, a sign of his developing confidence. Also, Ms. Reed needs us. She has good intentions for security, but lacks pattern recognition capacity. Jack smiled at his son's clinical assessment. And you think we can help her with that? I know we can. Ethan approached the counter, observing the food preparation with his characteristic attention to detail. She helped us when we needed safety. Now we can help her create safer systems for everyone. That's what partners do. Once again, Jack found himself awed by his son's moral clarity. While adults often complicated matters with ego and hesitation, Ethan saw straight to the ethical core. You're right, buddy. That is what partners do. They moved into a brownstone in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood a week later. Victoria had helped find the property close enough to both Reed's secure headquarters and Brighton Academy, yet with the character and solidity Jack preferred. The building had been recently renovated with surprising attention to acoustics and lighting modifications Jack suspected Victoria had quietly arranged. Ethan started at Brighton Academy the following Monday. The transition wasn't seamless change, never was for Ethan, but the school's understanding of neurodiversity made the adjustment easier than Jack had dared hope. Teachers who recognized Ethan's challenges as the flip side of his gifts, classmates who were introduced to Ethan's differences with matter-of-fact acceptance, and a curriculum flexible enough to challenge his extraordinary intellect while accommodating his sensory needs. Jack began working with Victoria's new Human Factors Security Division, bringing his restoration mindset to the world of cybersecurity. Just as he had learned to see the original craftsmanship beneath layers of damage and neglect in antique furniture, he helped Victoria's team identify the human patterns that technology alone couldn't capture. The first major project began 2 months after they settled in Boston. Victoria had secured a vacant warehouse in the city's innovation district, presenting her vision to Jack and Ethan over dinner at their brownstone, a common occurrence as their personal and professional lives increasingly intertwined. I want to create a different kind of space, Victoria explained, spreading architectural plans across the dining table, not just for Reed Secure, but for the community, a place where different minds can find resources tailored to their needs. Like a community center. Jack studied the plans with his carpenter's eye, more specialized, part training facility, part sensory adaptive workspace, part research center. Victoria turned to Ethan. I'm calling it Pattern Haven. Ethan's eyes widened slightly, his version of extreme surprise. After me. After what you showed us all, Victoria corrected gently, that patterns matter, that different perceptual abilities aren't defects, just different ways of processing information, and that sometimes those different perspectives save lives. The concept resonated deeply with Jack. Who would it serve? Neurodivergent individuals like Ethan, veterans with PTSD or sensory processing difficulties from combat experiences, anyone whose brain works in ways that standard environments don't accommodate. Victoria's passion was evident in her voice. We'd offer employment opportunities, training programs, sensory-friendly workspaces, and community resources. You'd need specialized design considerations. Jack was already mentally cataloging requirements. Acoustic treatments, lighting systems, transition zones between different sensory environments. That's exactly why I need both of you. Victoria looked between them. Your carpentry and restoration skills, Jack. Ethan's firsthand knowledge of sensory needs, my resources and technical background. Together we could build something revolutionary. Ethan nodded solemnly. A pattern sanctuary, where differences become strengths. The project consumed them over the following weeks. Jack oversaw the physical transformation of the warehouse, applying the same meticulous care he brought to furniture restoration, but on a massively larger scale. Custom-built quiet rooms with precise acoustic properties, modular workspaces that could be reconfigured to individual needs, lighting systems with adjustable spectrum and intensity controls, every detail considered through the lens of neurodivergent experience. Ethan became the project's conscience and test subject, spending hours after school evaluating spaces, suggesting modifications, and educating the construction team about sensory considerations most would never have considered. His confidence grew with each interaction, particularly when adults treated his perspectives with the seriousness they deserved. Victoria handled funding partnerships and strategic vision, leveraging Reed Secure's enhanced reputation following the quantum data scandal to secure support from tech companies, veterans organizations, and educational institutions. She frequently joined Jack and Ethan at the construction site, exchanging her executive wardrobe for jeans and work boots, learning basic carpentry skills alongside them. One evening as sunset painted the warehouse in amber light, Jack found Victoria standing alone in what would become the central gathering space. She stood motionless, taking in the partially completed work acoustic ceiling panels, installed specialized lighting fixtures awaiting connection, the bones of something extraordinary taking shape. Having second thoughts, Jack asked, joining her. Just the opposite. Victoria didn't turn, but a smile warmed her voice. I'm wondering why it took me so long to see what was missing in my approach to security, which is the human element, the recognition that technology alone can't solve problems created by human perception and behavior. She finally turned to face him. I spent years building digital walls when what people really needed were better doors, ways to navigate between different perceptual realities. Jack understood completely. Like restoration. You can't force materials to be something they're not. You have to work with their inherent properties, understand their strengths and limitations. Exactly. Victoria's gaze held his, the connection between them deepening with shared purpose. We're not fixing broken people, Jack. We're creating environments where different minds can function optimally. Just what Sarah used to say about Ethan. The memory brought warmth rather than pain. She called it changing the environment, not the child. Your wife was ahead of her time. Victoria moved closer. Ethan is fortunate to have had two parents who understood that. And now he has three people who see his value. Jack held her gaze, acknowledging what had been growing between them for months. We both do. Victoria's hand found his, the touch bridging more than physical distance. Partners in more ways than one. If you're ready for that. Jack had learned caution when it came to relationships, Ethan's needs always coming first. I've been ready since Evergreen. Victoria's directness was one of the qualities he'd come to cherish. But I wanted to be certain you were both ready too. Jack's response was interrupted by the arrival of Ethan, who entered carrying detailed drawings of sensory equipment arrangements for the East Wing. The boy paused, observing their linked hands with his characteristic analytical gaze. You're holding hands. That indicates a romantic relationship development. Ethan's matter-of-fact observation held neither judgment nor surprise. I calculated an 87% probability of this outcome based on interaction patterns over the past 3 months. Jack exchanged an amused glance with Victoria. And how do you feel about that probability becoming reality, buddy? Ethan considered the question with his usual thoroughness. Logically advantageous. Ms. Reed understands my sensory needs without requiring constant explanation. She values my pattern recognition abilities. And you're happier when she's present. Your voice modulation shows reduced stress indicators. That's quite an endorsement. Victoria's voice held suppressed laughter. It's practical analysis, Ethan corrected, already returning his attention to the drawings. Also, I've already adjusted my mental household schema to include her. Changing it back would be inefficient. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Jack found Victoria on the brownstone's small rooftop deck. The Boston skyline glittered against the darkness, a testament to human engineering and ambition. He's been preparing for this for months, Jack said, joining her. Apparently, we were less subtle than we thought. Or he's simply more perceptive than most people could hope to be. Victoria accepted the coffee he offered. Do you think he's really okay with it? Ethan doesn't say the things he doesn't mean. Jack settled beside her. His emotional processing may be different, but his honesty is absolute. If he had concerns, he'd tell us directly. I've never been part of a family before. Victoria's admission carried vulnerability rarely shown to others. Not since I was 14. I'm not sure I remember how. Neither do I. Jack considered how much had changed since Sarah's death. Ethan and I had to create our own version after Sarah died, and now we're creating something new again with you. Pattern Haven in more ways than one. Victoria leaned against him, the simple contact conveying more than words could express. 6 weeks later, Pattern Haven opened its doors. The morning dawned clear and cool autumn light filtering through the warehouse's restored windows as staff prepared for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Jack had worked through the night finalizing last-minute details, ensuring every aspect met the exacting standards they'd established. Ethan moved methodically through each space, performing final sensory checks with specialized equipment he and Victoria's engineers had developed. The boy had grown during the project, not just physically, but in confidence and social engagement. Working alongside adults who valued his unique perspectives had transformed him in subtle but profound ways. Victoria joined them in the central atrium, dressed in a tailored suit that managed to project both authority and accessibility. The first guests arrive in an hour. How are we feeling? All sensory parameters within optimal ranges. Ethan reported, consulting his tablet. Sound reflection coefficients at 0.12 or below. Light flicker frequency undetectable. Air circulation creates no perceptible drafts or sound patterns. Perfect, Victoria turned to Jack. In the physical spaces, ready. Jack had been awake for nearly 36 hours, but satisfaction outweighed fatigue. Final safety inspections cleared this morning. All adaptive equipment installed and tested. We're good to go. Then I'd say we've accomplished something extraordinary. Victoria's pride encompassed not just the facility, but the journey that had brought them here. Both of you have made this possible in ways I never could have alone. The opening ceremony drew a diverse crowd: tech industry representatives, veterans organizations, educational specialists, families with neurodivergent members, and media covering what many were calling a revolutionary approach to inclusive design. Jack stayed in the background, more comfortable with creation than celebration, while Victoria handled the formal presentations with her characteristic poise. Ethan surprisingly chose to speak briefly, a monumental step for a boy who had once hidden under desks when asked to participate in class discussions. He explained Pattern Haven's sensory considerations in precise technical language that somehow conveyed the profound emotional impact of spaces designed for minds like his. When he finished, the applause was genuine and sustained. As guests toured the facility, Jack observed their reactions. The wonder on parents' faces when their sensory-sensitive children moved comfortably through spaces designed with their needs in mind. The visible relaxation of veterans as they encountered environments that didn't trigger hypervigilance. The excitement of neurodivergent adults discovering workspaces that accommodated rather than challenged their perceptual differences. Mr. Sullivan. A woman approached, her hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a boy about Ethan's age. I'm Emily Winters. This is my son, Noah. Jack recognized the surname immediately. Any relation to Principal Winters at Oak Ridge Elementary? My sister-in-law. Emily smiled ruefully. She told me about you and Ethan when we were struggling with Noah's diagnosis. Said you were the most dedicated father she'd ever encountered, even if you did challenge her administrative decisions regularly. Jack chuckled. We had different perspectives on accommodations versus segregation. Well, after seeing this place, Emily gestured around them, I think you were right. Noah has similar sensory issues to Ethan, and he's been more comfortable in the past 30 minutes than in most public spaces ever. Noah, who had been examining a tactile wall installation, looked up at Jack. Did your son really catch bad guys by seeing patterns? He did. Jack knelt to the boy's eye level. And he helped design this place so kids like you could have spaces that don't hurt your senses. Can I meet him? I think that could be arranged. Jack spotted Ethan across the room, deep in technical discussion with a visiting engineer. He's making friends these days, something I wasn't sure would ever happen. As the day progressed, Jack found himself drawn to the quiet garden they'd created in what had once been a loading dock. The space offered a sensory retreat, carefully selected plants providing natural fragrance without overwhelming sensitivity, a small fountain creating white noise to mask urban sounds, strategic plantings creating perception of privacy without actual isolation. He found Victoria already there, taking a momentary break from the crowds and conversations. Overwhelmed, he asked, joining her on a bench designed for both comfort and acoustic dampening. In the best possible way. She leaned against him, public reserve giving way to personal connection. I keep thinking about my mother, how different her life might have been with spaces like this, with understanding like this. She'd be proud of what you've created. What we've created, Victoria corrected him gently. This is as much yours and Ethan's as mine. Jack nodded, accepting the shared credit. I received a letter this morning from Afghanistan. Victoria straightened, immediately attentive. Kandahar, the family I told you about. The father's brother survived. He's a doctor, now working with an international medical organization. Jack had carried the weight of Kandahar for so long that speaking of it still felt strange. I wrote to him 3 months ago through Veterans Reconciliation channels. Never expected a response. What did he say? That he forgives me. Jack's voice roughened with emotion. That he understands the impossible situations soldiers face with faulty intelligence. That his faith teaches that saving one life is like saving all of humanity. Victoria took his hand, her strength anchoring him as it had increasingly done in recent months. He means Ethan. Yes. Somehow he knew about the adoption and about my connection to Ethan. Jack had read the letter a dozen times, still processing its impact. He said that by giving Ethan a home, I hadn't just saved one life, but honored all those lost in the conflict. He's right. So Victoria's certainty was absolute. What you've done for Ethan, what you've both done here with Pattern Haven, it creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. As evening approached and the opening celebrations wound down, Jack found Ethan and Victoria in what had become Ethan's favorite space, a small workshop area designed with the boys' sensory needs in mind, where he could work on detailed projects without environmental overwhelm. Final visitor departed 6 minutes ago, Ethan reported, looking up from the circuit board he was assembling. Operational success indicators at approximately 94.3% based on feedback metrics. That's extraordinary for a first day. Victoria smiled at his precise assessment. What would improve the remaining minor adjustments to the southeast lighting grid, 2 degrees reduction in ambient temperature in the multimedia room, additional sound dampening in the transition corridor between active and quiet zones. Ethan returned to his circuit board, adding, also we should get a dog. Jack blinked at the non sequitur. A dog for the facility. Research indicates therapy dogs provide significant sensory regulation benefits for both neurodivergent individuals and PTSD-affected veterans. Ethan continued working without looking up. Also, I would like one. At home. For us. Jack exchanged an amused glance with Victoria. That's quite a recommendation shift from the boy who once said animals were too unpredictable to live with. I've recalibrated my risk assessment parameters. Ethan's tone remained matter-of-fact, and calculated that the benefits outweigh potential sensory challenges. Also, Ms. Reed Victoria has agreed to help with training protocols. Has she now? Jack raised an eyebrow at Victoria, who shrugged innocently. We may have had preliminary discussions about appropriate breeds and training methodologies. Her smile held no apology. Purely hypothetical, of course. Of course. Jack couldn't help but smile back, recognizing another step in their evolving family dynamic. Well, I suppose Pattern Haven could use a therapy dog. And maybe our home, too. Ethan looked up, a rare smile brightening his face. Both environments would benefit from the addition. It's logical optimization. Later that evening, as they walked home through Boston's historic streets, Ethan slightly ahead, cataloging architectural features as was his habit. Jack felt a sense of completion he hadn't experienced since before Sarah's illness. The antique writing desk had been finished the previous week, restored to its original beauty, with patience and respect for its inherent qualities. Pattern Haven had opened its doors, offering sanctuary to minds that processed the world differently. And somehow, improbably, he and Ethan had found not just safety, but belonging. What are you thinking? Victoria asked, her hand warm in his despite the autumn chill. About restoration. Jack watched his son moving confidently through the world that had once overwhelmed him. Not just fixing what's broken, but revealing the strength and beauty that was there all along. In antiques and spaces, Victoria followed his gaze to Ethan. In people, in all of it. Jack squeezed her hand gently. Sometimes what looks broken is just waiting for the right environment, the right tools, the right touch to reveal its true value. Like an antique desk with water damage, Victoria smiled. Or a boy who hears sounds others can't. Or a CEO who trusted algorithms more than instincts. Or a former SEAL carrying battlefield guilt. Jack completed the thought. All just waiting for the right restoration. Ahead of them, Ethan turned back his expression, holding the particular intensity that signaled an important observation. The patterns have balanced, he said simply, gesturing to the three of them. This is a complete system now. Jack smiled at his son's unique way of describing their family. Yes, buddy, I think it is. As they continued home through the gathering darkness, Jack reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate father trying to protect his extraordinary son from a world that didn't understand him, to partners in creating spaces where different minds could thrive, from isolation to connection, from brokenness to restoration. Not fixing what was broken, but revealing the strength and beauty that had been there all along.